Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Hiring and Inspiring. Today's guest is Zak Zainal. Zak is a recent connection of mine, fellow recruitment professional. He's a guy I know is relatively newish to the profession, but I understand he's doing some really good things. So it's going to be a conversation today all about recruitment, all about how he's getting on. Um, all about his particular industry as well. I know he recruits in the tech and cyber space, so I'm looking forward to finding a bit more about that, and also how Zak's career has sort of developed and got to where he is today and his future ambitions. So, mate, Zak, with that introduction, welcome to the show. How are you getting on?
Very well, thanks, mate. Sorry, I just quickly set to do not disturb on the laptop, so just want to that's on me that one. Yeah, thanks for having
No
me on,
worries.
Joe.
Yeah, mate, most welcome. So, let's get into it. Let's kick it off. So you have been in recruitment for a couple of years now with straight up recruitment.
Yes, correct.
How's it all been going? Sum it up to me. How you found it so far?
I've taken an appreciation for the fact that I think that there's an art and a science to recruitment. There's a science in the sense where it's like you do X amount of calls, you do X amount of prospecting, you get X amount of results, and the art is knowing what to say at what point and how to use language to get your point across in a certain way, and that's been a lot of the learning. I still think I'm in that learning phase. I don't think I wouldn't walk around calling myself a seasoned or seasoned recruiter, obviously not, but just really appreciating the opportunity to kind of learn the craft. And that's why I look at it as a craft. There's a sales aspect, there's a
Yeah,
relationship and account management aspect as well. So all these different things. It's been a lot it's been really fun, actually. I'm really enjoying it.
yeah, that's great to hear, mate. What has been maybe the biggest sort of learning curve so far? You mentioned there's been a lot of learnings. What's been, if there was something that stood out?
Qualify, qualify, qualify.
Okay.
So, if someone, for example, I obviously operate in the tech space. If someone mentions a tool, like, for example, like an IDM tool, or in a specific kind of SOC tool, like a Sentinel or something like that, it's important to understand. Okay, you've mentioned the tool. What context have you used it in? Because anyone can put tools and certain skills on their resume, but
Yeah.
if you can't explain to me the context you've used it in, then you really haven't used the tool.
Hmm. So something I always go back to is try not to make assumptions. Is that what you're sort of going at? Don't just assume that candidate
Yeah,
knows exactly what they're talking about. Really have to drill in, qualify, as you say, qualify that they're the right fit or whatever. Is that what you mean?
yeah, definitely, definitely.
Mm. You talk about at the start the art and the science. Something I've thought about as well in recruitment. I agree. I think it's definitely both. Would you say it's more heavily a science, or would you say it's more of an art? Just on that point, what are your thoughts?
I mean, so to give you a like the science context, right? So the science context for me is okay. So I specialize in cybersecurity. So breaking it down is okay. If I'm talking to hiring managers about security engineers, then it's about identifying other companies that are looking at security engineers, and the science of it is really kind of doubling down and understanding what other individuals I should be speaking to about similar sorts of candidates.
Yeah,
What kind of industries haven't been tapped into these kind of markets yet, where there are going to be requirements. Cybersecurity for outside of the tech world is still something that a lot of companies are trying to embrace and looking to kind of build out their own teams. But the science of it is really just about how you can use candidates, or how not how you can use candidates. That sounds really bad, but how the people you interact with can benefit other parties, and so how there's a crossover. So and part of the benefits of specializing is simply that you're talking when you're talking to candidates that apply to multiple hiring managers. Not when if you, for example, submit three candidates for a role, you've got and one of them gets the role, you still got two quality candidates that could be placed elsewhere or could have
yeah,
opportunities elsewhere. So that's the science aspect for me. The art part is how you manage the recruitment process. How you ensure that you're constantly getting buy-in from candidates and from hiring managers. When to use, for example, a pause, so that you kind of let the candidate or the hiring manager lead the conversation, and they come to the realization, or they're honest with you. If you don't give them the opportunity, or you don't make that awkward silence sometimes, then you kind of don't let them answer the question the way that it needs to really be answered. So
Yeah, it's what you say and how you say it.
yeah,
That's what I always come back to. I think that art is, and it's definitely how I just what you just said. I think the science is making sure you're, so there's sort of three aspects to it. There's the activity, like are you making enough volume, enough calls? Are you
yeah,
speaking to enough people? Are you putting the reps in there? And then there's the quality, which is probably more the art, like how are you doing it? And then are you doing it with the right people?
yeah,
So are you speaking to enough people in your niche that you know are maybe an ideal customer or an ideal candidate? And if you kind of put them all together, that's the sort of magic formula for success. And then the art piece is really the managing the moments of truth. So when you're on the phone to a client and maybe it's in the deal's in the balance, or you've just got to manage a particular moment, that's where what you've just mentioned about the timing and how you say it and what you say, that's the real skill of it. That's the art of it. Do you agree?
yeah, yeah. Especially the pointy end of a recruitment process.
Yeah.
When you're really reconfirming that commitment, it's a big one is when you're asking about resignations, because at the end of the day, a lot of the time, when you're working with a recruiter, it's passive candidates. It's candidates that are working elsewhere, and that's
Yeah.
one of the added benefits of working with people like yourself and myself is that very rarely are we representing candidates in the market. A lot of the time, it is candidates who are still employed, and for one reason or another, they're looking elsewhere, and you have to manage, or you have to be able to use the right language to encourage that conversation about the resignation, and
Mm.
ensure that just remind them how you remind them about why they're looking to leave, things like that. And the language you use, that is exactly what you said. That's the art of it.
Yeah. And it's like, have you done your homework? Have you been thorough enough? With the qualifying, the salaries, is that all in line? A lot of including myself, sometimes you can miss steps in that, and it often comes back and bites you from behind.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. It's even something as simple as do you have any holidays organized? You know,
yeah, yeah,
what's your notice
yeah. Or
period?
yeah, what's your wife going to say about this? Because
That, that
that's
Yeah, I think that
what.
that's actually interesting, right? Like, that for me is, I think one of the things that I really enjoy about it is looking to understand for both candidates and possible clients, what are some of how can I get them to empathize with me with my life? For example, if
Mm,
I try to ask them, about, their weekends to get a bit of insight, if they have a family, that's something that, I can really empathize with. I've got a young family myself.
yeah.
Are they from overseas, or where are they from? There's certain cultural, especially in the tech space, you've got a real breadth of people from different cultures and backgrounds. So if you understand how a
Yeah.
certain culture operates, then you're going to know your candidate or your client a lot better, and you have a lot more talking points.
Mm. Mate, you said earlier that you found the role pretty fun. You've enjoyed a lot of it. What have been some of the highlights?
So what I find fun about the role is the fact that I've personally grown. Like, I find that if you come into recruitment with the aim of being X amount percent better 6 months from now, then, and when you're on the phone and you walk away and you've had a really good conversation, or a recruitment process goes really well, for me it's more about getting the process down pat. And I'm enjoying the fact that if I compare myself to this time last year, when I get off the phone with a candidate or a client, I feel much more confident about there's going to be a positive outcome, because I've been putting the reps in and putting the work, and it gets to a point where it's like, this is enjoyable, this is fun. It doesn't feel
Mm.
laborious.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's something that's, as you say, if you look back on yourself a year ago and you can see the tangible improvements you've made, that's really rewarding. And that's something I always say to people is like the skills you learn in the job and the improvements you make. Um, they improve your life as well outside of work, which is, it sounds like, that confidence, things like negotiation, resilience, the stuff you develop in the job. This is what I love about recruitment. It helps and impacts your life. If you get experience, dealing with setbacks in the job, as we all know, things can go wrong all the time.
Yep.
When something goes wrong in your personal life or whatever, you're just much more equipped to deal with it because of the experience you've got in this job. And obviously, I'm going to say this about recruitment. I love it, but it seems like that's something that you've really enjoyed about the role.
Yeah, 100%. And the lessons that I take home from work and vice versa, like you for me, personal improvement and personal development, it's something that everyone talks about, but it's something for me, it's really important because, like I said, you don't want to be the same person you were 12 months ago. And those lessons you learn in recruitment, how to deal with, conflicting opinions or how to push back. That's something I've really learned how to do is, push back on a candidate or a client
Yeah.
when it comes to, the negotiation piece or, it's no mystery, tech salaries, probably the start of this time last year were much higher than probably what people are looking at now. And,
Yep.
having the confidence to say, look, Mr. Client or Miss Client or Mr. Candidate, Miss Candidate, look, what you're expecting is above market at the moment. This is what we're looking at. And just having the confidence to say, look, if they're not okay with it, that's okay. But the delivery of it and the way you communicate,
Yeah.
for me, it's becoming a real skill set of mine.
Is that something you maybe struggled with initially then, to push
I
back?
think I have a very relaxed nature. I'm more likely to
Yeah.
let things go. And
Yeah.
that's as opposed to someone who's very, everything has to be perfect. So for me, that in itself has been a transition away from kind of letting things go to the keeper. I'll just let that go, as opposed to actually hang on a second. No, we can't move forward unless this is addressed. And that in itself, I think, is a skill that a lot of people lack today.
Yeah, it's just a little bit uncomfortable, isn't it? And I'm something I can relate to, especially in my early days, that I'm not naturally a sort of confrontational person.
Correct.
I don't necessarily enjoy it. Some people do, I think, but I don't. And
I'm
when
not a
you have
drama.
to, yeah, exactly. But when you have to sort of say, right, this is what's going to happen, or whatever, push back on a candidate or client. It's just a little bit uncomfortable. You can feel it in your stomach almost. But so often, when you do sort of push through and have that push back, you can get results. And it's just that sort of overcoming that moment of discomfort is something that can really benefit you in your recruitment career. That's the moment when you can start asking those difficult questions. That, for me anyway, that's when you can start asking those difficult questions. Was as a sort of what am I trying to say? Lightning bulb moment
Yeah.
in my career.
Yeah, definitely that getting comfortable, getting uncomfortable. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
If you've ever watched a David Goggins video or one of those inspirational people, it's like the getting used to being uncomfortable. I think is something that you have to develop in life, not just in recruitment,
yeah,
because
yeah.
outside your professional life, life always throws you curveballs anyway. So the more used, and I think the beauty of recruitment is that you're so used to dealing with people and having emotions change, and you'll have someone who's all bought in on the Friday evening. You check in with them again on Monday, and something's changed. It's a completely new
Yeah,
situation. You're back to square one. So you just get used to kind of taking those hits, and then it's
yeah.
just about rolling with the punches.
Just picking up on something you said there, you're getting used to being uncomfortable even outside of work. Is there things you do outside of your recruitment career
Um,
that
yeah.
you're sort of
So I did
actively
a
pushing yourself?
so I did a half marathon in December,
Nice.
and I'm not exactly built for running. I'm about 160, and I'm not going to say my weight on camera, but I'm definitely on the heavier side. Um, I had a blister the size of my thumb on my right foot, and my
Right.
left leg seized up at about kilometer 7. But for me, that was it's almost like an awakening moment where you could and whether it's running or something physical or learning a new skill, when you can learn to push past limits and really kind of stretch yourself. It was for me the whole thing was just purely mental.
Yeah.
If for me, I've taken that attitude to this year, and looking to do a full one later, a full marathon later this year. I'm just putting that out there.
Nice. Nice.
But the mentality of it, that look, you're capable of a lot more than what you realize, and that is kind of what's holding me in good stead at the moment and helping me drive my focus.
Well, I've got that on record now. You're running a marathon this year, so
Yeah,
no
well,
backing out now, mate.
I'm actually raising money for Beyond Blue. I haven't gone live
Okay.
with the campaign, but definitely happy to share with anyone who would like to donate. There's a requirement that I have to raise. I'll be honest. I'm just going to say it publicly. I'm a bit unsure about the fact that you have to raise 2,000, like a certain amount before you can actually get confirmation you're racing. But I think look,
Okay.
it's a good cause. So look, if anyone wants to hit me up
Is it
afterwards, or happy to
is this
share
for
the details.
The Melbourne Marathon in October? Is it?
Correct. Yeah, the Nike one.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well,
I
all
was
the
gonna
best for that,
do it
mate.
myself, but it sold out in 48 hours, man.
Oh, right.
So it looks like everyone's trying
That's
to run marathons
crazy.
these days.
That's Yeah. That's crazy. Well, all the best with that.
Thanks, mate.
And then something what you said about just pushing past your limits. I think it's so true. I think you quoted him earlier. David Goggins talks about when you think you're kind of at your limit, you're only really at 60% or something along
Yeah,
those lines. It's pretty true. Like there's always another level you can find if you really dig in.
definitely.
Mate, so switching back to recruitment, the business you work for, straight up recruitment. It's a relative startup, from what I understand. What's it
Yep.
like working in that sort of environment, a startup recruitment business?
I mean, for me personally, I prefer. You know, I worked at I've generally only worked at smaller companies,
Yeah,
and for me, I'm more interested in building the machine than being a cog. Right. So, when I talk about building the machine, look, we spend a lot of time, and part of my learning was going through processes and systems, and what the expectations are as opposed to coming into them. And I
yeah,
think that, I can't really speak about what it's like to work in a big agency. So I've never had that experience, but, the accountability is really there. If I come in and have a bad day or a bad week, you know, Jed's going to know about it because it's just me and him.
yeah,
Whereas,
yeah.
if I was
There's no
maybe
hiding.
there's none. And
Yeah,
I think, part of, for me, why I feel so confident in, speaking, and, why if you'd have kind of put me up against, I'm pretty confident in my BD muscles. I'm just going to put that out there. It's just really because I get a lot of real time feedback, and there's ultimate accountability in what we do.
yeah,
I basically sit next to him 5 days a week. So, if I'm not doing what's meant to be done, he knows about it straight away. He may not pick
yeah,
you up on it. He
yeah,
may not say anything until the end of the week, but it's the end of the day, you know, he
yeah.
knows.
Yeah, and that is a challenge of it. It's all on you. It's full accountability. There's no hiding. But the benefits, and my business, we're a small company as well. If you can have success, then it's pretty cool because you're a great factor in. You're a big part. A
Yeah,
huge cog in the success of that machine. It's pretty. You can really make a name for yourself in
correct.
obviously a small business, which is
Yeah,
what I love, and it sounds like you're the same.
and I think it's actually given me access to some opportunities that had I gone into. It's actually interesting. Before joining straight up, I actually had an interview with Robert Walters about 18 months before I even got into recruitment, through a mutual contact of mine. So I had an interview that may have resulted in a role there that didn't eventuate. But I think that this opportunity here has given me the ability to kind of put myself out there and make a brand for myself that is aligned with the business as opposed to a brand
Yeah,
that is within the business.
yeah, 100%. You talk about sitting next to the Jed. I know he's the founder, right? What's it like working with him? What's it been like working under him and under his guidance? I know he's a sort of mentor figure for you.
Yeah,
How's that experience all been?
it's been for me. It's I think I saw when you talk about wanting to improve, the biggest thing is actually being accountable. And he's very good at keeping me accountable in the sense of not just in the sense of you've got to hit your numbers, but giving me the ownership to say, look, if I hit my numbers, it's me building out a career.
Mm,
And so, and a lot of the feedback he gives me from someone who's been in the industry 10 plus years, you don't get that access to someone with that kind of experience very often. So for me, it's been a real blessing in the sense that I'm talking to
Yeah.
someone who's seen it all, done it all, had great success. Has built out a strong brand in the tech space, and it's something that I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, sounds like you've done a great job of being a sponge. Just soaking up everything that everything he all his wisdom and guidance.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
got a long way to go. There's always things. It's incredible when you've got someone next to you, right, and you come off a call with a candidate or you do a BD call, and when they ask you, "Oh, do you ask this?" and then you look down and you think,
yeah, yeah,
what I mean, like those moments where some people might not like that, but for me, it's like, okay, cool.
yeah,
It's that real time feedback. Like, you know what, I need to remember that for next time because, like you said,
yeah,
when we started the conversation, it just takes one thing to not be addressed, and then the
yeah,
whole recruitment process falls over at the pointy end.
yeah, yeah. It's so true. Um, how did you end up getting into recruitment? By the way, how did you find this job? What was your sort of your journey to get where you are
Yeah,
today?
so I was working at a crypto exchange as an account manager,
Right.
and if you follow that market at all, you know how volatile it can be and how quickly things swing up and down. And fortunately, got made redundant. So again, that's something that when I speak to candidates that are in that situation, I can talk from experience. Right?
Okay.
I know what that conversation is like. I know what it's like to be, asked to leave the premise because it was in financial services. So, once I received the letter, I had to, leave all my belongings, all my equipment there. And so that's something that, when I talk to candidates, I can say it from a real point of empathy that it's something I've been through. I understand exactly what you're going through. But so I got made redundant, and then I was on the job search and updated my seek and was reaching out to some contacts I had around and whatnot, and actually got tapped on the shoulder by a rec to rec. So mind you, I think when I got hired, the market was very different to what it is now.
Mm.
I had sales experience, but I didn't necessarily have recruitment experience, and so I got tapped on the shoulder by a rec to rec, and then I had another opportunity at a larger tech firm as like an account manager slash BDM. And at the time, I was talking to my wife. I was like, "Look, I've got a couple of opportunities here. One's to join, a recruitment startup, basically, or wants to go join a larger company." And she said, "Look, what would you prefer?" And I had a real good think about it. And going back to that thing of building the machine or being a cog, I'd much rather
Yeah.
build the machine. And here I am, 18 months later, still enjoying
Yeah.
it.
So were you even considering recruitment before the rec to rec tap you in the shoulder?
Not really. Not really,
Mm.
if I'm honest. I was looking at sales roles. I was looking at sort of
Sure. Yeah.
in the tech space, and if success the different might have come across yourself at that point, but um,
Mm.
but yeah, it was just one of those things where I actually showed up to the in person interview with a PowerPoint presentation about straight up.
Nice.
I'd be happy to share it at some point. But yeah, I literally went in, went through, looked at some of the employees there, and looked at some of the branding. I actually came with some recommendations, not knowing much about the industry, but what I'd seen. So
Yeah.
I think, for me, it was like, if I'm going to have a crack, I'm going to have a proper crack and do something a bit different here.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think there's anything wrong with, taking the initiative, and it's something that at the end of the day you have to do your research whenever you're looking to work with a client. So why would it be any different when you're looking to work
Absolutely.
in a job interview?
Well, it sounds like it worked, mate. It sounds like it got you over the line.
Somewhat, yeah.
And yeah, the rest is history. Brilliant. What about the industry you work in, the cyberspace? What can you tell anyone who's listening about that? Because it's something it's obviously it's been around for a while. I'm 100% not an expert in it. It's something that you kind of hear is like this huge, massive sort of potential future sort of issue, but people aren't really talking about it enough. Apparently, what's your take on the cyberspace?
What you realize is that I suppose if you broaden it to technology, is that you've got technology companies and you've got companies that have a technology aspect to them. All right, so we've got a lot of we've got a lot of companies that are built that their whole company is built around the technology, whether it's software, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's a cloud product, and that is their whole company. Whereas, what you consider end users, to give you some examples, your large banks, maybe energy companies, they utilize technology as part of a business function.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity is something that, over the past 12 months, due to some breaches, has become it was more of an afterthought, right? Whereas like, look, we'll have the bare minimum, but now it's become a case of, look, the attacks aren't reducing. If anything, they're becoming more and more prolific. And ASIC towards the end of last year came out. So that's the Australian Security and Insurance Commission. So they came out and said, look, if boards are found to be negligent, it's not they're going to be held accountable. And so we're seeing a real shift in not just the tools of cybersecurity, but also the understanding that it's a company responsibility. It's every individual in the company has some sort of responsibility in contributing to a positive cybersecurity posture is the terminology we use.
Yeah.
So, it's so for example, speak a role that has really grown along aligned with these hacks has been cybersecurity awareness and education. You know, and that person's role, they kind of sit in between sort of the security team and the broader business, and they're communicating what are good practices, how to spot a phishing email, how to ensuring that people have got their MFA, and giving them sort of some, because the biggest real issue that companies face is not necessarily from the cybersecurity team. It's from, for lack of a better word, Jane from accounts, who clicked on a phishing email, and all of a sudden the hackers got in through that way. So
Yeah.
what we're seeing is that, as well as companies looking to bolster their security teams and make sure that they've got all the latest technology and have all the right skill sets to be able to protect and respond, it's becoming much more of a company wide awareness focus for a lot of companies out there.
And in terms of your role recruiting in that industry, is there, because it's a newish sort of industry, is there like a big skills gap? Is there not enough people with the knowledge and skills to out there for the demand? What's the situation?
So there's a couple of things. So, a lot of the time you're seeing security people move to similar, if not the same roles. So there's a lot of, attrition within security teams. However, there has been a real effort to bring in people with, the right skill sets to give them some technical know-how to be able to perform the role. So, for example, if you work in a high pressure environment, like for example the ER room, there's been cases of nurses switching from working in emergency to working in incident response, which is it's a function of cybersecurity, but taking the skill sets required to operate under pressure. We've seen a lot of people from maybe the software or the cloud space transition into AppSec or cloud security roles. So
Yeah.
the reality is that there is a shortage, but in terms of getting people upskilled enough, there's always a case of if you are passionate about cybersecurity and see it as a long-term career for you, then look, with any sort of career change, there's going to be a couple of steps forward before you start taking a couple of steps back before you start taking steps forward.
Yeah. I like it. You talk about passion for the industry. I know actually, it's something you are personally interested in, and you've got a passion for it. I know just from seeing you make a bit of noise online. I know you've attended a few events, you've spoken at a few sort of networking conferences within your industry, which is obviously great. That sort of active or sort of conscious effort to really immerse yourself in your particular industry that you recruit in, something I always think is so important. How important has it been in your success, and how important is it to just a general recruiter to do that, would you say?
So I want to take it back to when I went to ASA, so which was the security conference they have it in every state, and I was actually talking to another recruiter who operates in the security space, and he was telling me, years 1 and 2 were really rough for him. That's it's really reassuring. I'm still in years 1 or 2. I've had a few wins, but probably more losses than wins at this point. I mean, it's the old, if you ask a gambler if they're up or down, they're probably down, even though they think they're up. If you ask a recruiter if they had more wins than losses, they'll probably say they had more wins, but the reality is, they've had more losses. And, so it reassured me that the approach I'm taking by, going to events, by speaking on panels, which is I was given that platform by the opportunity straight up. Just want to make that clear that it was And that in itself is a
Okay.
product of going to a smaller company and having more ownership and more of a, I suppose, ownership within the business and more of a share in sort of how we want to promote ourselves. But the reality is that if you want to recruitment, the advice that he gave me was that, look, you grind hard for the first couple of years, and then years 3, 4, 5, if you're consistent and you're doing the same things and you continuously put yourself out there, that's where you see that sort of exponential wins. You see the exponential amount of wins. And,
Yeah.
so for me, it's number one, it's about understanding trends. We actually you want to be able to speak and understand what's happening in the industry, whether it's cybersecurity industry. But what it does is it gives me access to people that I wouldn't otherwise get access to. It allows me to build my network organically. You know, I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. Cold calling, it's bread and butter of our business. It's bread and butter of what we do every day. But to be able to build in-person connections in today's age where people are getting spam emailed, they're getting spam called, it's a slower route in the sense of you're not going to maybe get immediate results, but you have much more stronger connections. And understand, right? Like, for me, if I talk to an engineer in 2024, in 2026, that person may be a hiring manager.
Yeah.
So it's taking, and for me, it's, when you talk about wins, obviously the measurement for a recruiter is how many placements they have. But, when you're early on, like I am myself, for me, the wins are, how many meaningful connections am I making? How many people
Yeah.
can I call and they're actually happy to answer the phone? That's something it's not exactly easy to do, but again, it's for me gearing up for years 3, 4, 5 when I've established myself and I've got those connections, and they're more than just a professional relationship. You can start calling people
Yeah.
friends, and that for me is by immersing yourself in a space, whether it's sales or software or cyber. When you're known as someone who actually cares about that industry, people are more likely to give you 5-10 minutes of their time for a phone call, as opposed to
Yeah.
if every time you call a hiring manager or a candidate about a role, they're
Yeah.
probably going to answer the phone, but it's a very different type of relationship.
Yeah. That's so good, man. It's so good you're doing that at only year 2 in your career, because the pitfall that a lot of people fall into is that, as you say, go for that sort of quick win. Maybe just try and get on the phone to someone and get a job on and close a quick deal with a company you don't really want to work with long term or something like that. That finding, doing the activities that don't necessarily reap rewards straight away, maybe like attending that conference and networking with some industry people, getting your name out there, that it might not yield anything for a year, 2 years down the track, say, that relationship. But it's, if you can, it's staying patient. It's just understanding the delayed gratification, basically,
Yep.
of looking, taking that longer term view. I can almost guarantee it will stand you in really good stead if you keep that up.
And I mean, the reality is, it's very rare you call a manager the first time they give you a job after a 10-minute cold call.
Yeah.
It's really about, maybe you'll touch base to them in a couple of months and then another couple of
Yeah.
months. And then, even then, for us, at the moment, something that recruiters are facing across the board is the fact that companies are really focusing on using their internal talent teams to fill roles at the moment.
Mm.
And, that was something that, when it was difficult to get tech professionals, there was a much more of a likelihood to go, okay, cool, look, we're really struggling. Cool, who have you got?
Yeah.
Whereas now
Yeah.
it's like, all right, look, it's with talent at the moment. Touch base with me in a month. It's like, well,
Yeah.
so if you've only got that relationship with someone, then you're less likely to be able to build a constant workflow that way.
Yeah, for sure. Something also I think I saw you're looking to do in a similar vein to this, start your own podcast and network
Yes.
around that. What's the plan with that? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I recorded an episode last week. Just
Nice.
finalizing the. It was in person. So just finalizing the editing. For me, it's really important that when I'm talking to professionals, I get their approval to upload. So just working that through, but that for me is there's a few reasons we're doing something like this. Number one is to showcase the work that cybersecurity individuals do in the space. Number two is that every person's entrance into the industry is different. So we want to show, for example, the person I spoke to used to work in travel. She used to work in the travel and tourism agency. Now she's in
Yeah.
cybersecurity. and also to shed a light and help provide some overall awareness around the space. So there's a few different reasons for doing it, and again, it's more about giving back to the community. Like it's one of those things where it's their time, it's my time. So we're not we're purely doing it just to, and from a recruitment standpoint, as I said, cold calling is bread and butter, but for 2024 for us this year is a big focus on what are we doing differently to kind of get ourselves out there, and this is one of the things we're really looking to do.
Yeah, like it. What, and Straight Up Podcast, is that what it's called? What is it?
I'll leave the name for now. But you'll find out soon enough. Yeah.
All right, stay tuned. Moving forward, mate, we've spoken about the past, how you got to where you are, what you're doing at the moment. What about the future? I know you're an ambitious guy. You've sort of laid the groundwork. What does the next sort of couple of years look like for yourself?
A lot of the same, to be honest. I think of the recipe and the science of it, which is that the activity piece, getting yourself out there, getting yourself out there better, in the sense that you go to your first networking event, you're a little bit shy, you maybe don't know as many people, but when you start going to events and you start recognizing people, and you catch up for the third, fourth time, you become that front of mind person, and it's a timing thing. So for me, it's not going to change. It's going to be more attending events, more cold calls, more meetings. That side can't change. I'm not at the point where I'm getting a whole bunch of inbound where I can kind of sit on my thumbs a bit and kind of enjoy, what some of the lifestyles that recruiters can build up. And I think, look, the reality is that, the market can change so quickly. So if you're not constantly trying to, bring in new business or trying to work on new accounts, that's when you can kind of get into a bit of a rut where all of a sudden you've had a number of jobs come through and they can dry up pretty quickly from what I've seen.
That's it. You can never get complacent in this role. You've always got to, there's always more you can do. And I think that just the goal of just small improvements here and there, I think is spot on, mate. I love it. We've spoken about, the work you do. Why do you do that? What is there like an overarching reason why you work so hard, and what sort of drives your motivation and success to yourself? What does success mean to you? That's the sort of the closing question on my final one to you.
So success for me is being able to leave at the end of the day knowing I've given a good day's work, right? And focusing on what I can control, control the controllables. Because at the end of the day, I can't control what happens outside of my own actions. And, by focusing on what I can control, you're less likely to overreact or react in a negative manner when things don't go your way. And, when it comes to, motivations, I've got a young family, so I'm the breadwinner. So for me, it's important to show up even when I don't want to. There's plenty of days, or not plenty of days. There are days where you just kind of walk into the office and think, what am I doing to myself? But at the end of the day, it's for them. And that's something that it's also something that I think it's important for me that, while I'm on the topic, that when you do have things that people can relate to, it's a really strong tool, and people can actually, when you've got things that are relatable to your potential candidates or clients, that's a really good way to build relationships, because if you become relatable, people are more likely to like you. Whereas if you come across as very foreign and, there's nothing that kind of ties you to you other than the fact that I'm calling you about potential business or I'm calling you about a potential role, that for me is something that's very important that I wouldn't overlook. But, motivations is, want to be successful. I want to look after my family, and, I just want to be good at my job. I want to be able to kind of come in, like, what? I aced that call. I aced that meeting, and walk away thinking, I'm actually a good operator. I'm a good practitioner. That for me is a really big motivation.
Yeah. So it's no need to overcomplicate it. Keep it simple. I want to be good at my job. I want to provide for my family. I love it. Zak Zainal, thank you very much for joining me on the show today. Really enjoyed that. I think there's a lot that anyone in recruitment can take away from that. It's really impressive that someone like yourself, who is only a couple of years into the profession, has such sort of wise knowledge, and methods and thought process to the whole piece. So, mate, hats off to you. think you're on track for some really great stuff. So keep it up. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate everything you shared to me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. Much appreciated.